Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Capital Edge Tip Line. My name is Chad Braley. I'm the CEO here at Capital Edge. And we've got a few things to talk about. Obviously, there's plenty to talk about, but we're going to focus in on three things today. That's going to be tariffs. That's also going to be the executive order on ensuring commercial, cost-effective solutions in federal contracts. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we're hearing and what's going on over at the Department of Energy amongst other agencies, if you will. First off on tariffs, right? I think it changes every day. By the time this video goes live, what I say may be irrelevant. But from a regulatory perspective, that's where we're getting a lot of the questions, right? Not necessarily what's the percentage going to be, because again, that's seems to be a moving target at the moment. But think about it from a contracts perspective, because this is going to impact contractors. You've got the FAR Clause 52-229-3 for federal, state, and local taxes to evaluate whether or not that is in your contract. That doesn't use the term tariff, but it does speak to duties that are charged on goods and services, obviously, along with taxes, which is in the name of the clause. Also evaluating whether we can seek an exemption for these supplies that we're buying. If we're buying from foreign supplies, there's some exemption criteria in FAR 25.9. There's also DFARS 225.9, which has a little bit more detail and a little bit more clarity. And then also taking a look at the contracts for FAR 52-225-8 and the relevant DFARS associated clause at 252-225-7013, which is duty-free entry, to see if there are exemptions, waivers, etc., to help recoup and recover these costs. We also need to think about it as things get more clear and we actually get, actual negotiated percentages, agreements, whatever the case may be, in terms of, estimating those costs, right, and disclosing those costs. If some of these exemptions and duties, or exemptions and waivers may not be applicable. So a lot to think about there, and be cognizant of, not necessarily something to implement immediately at the moment. Moving on to the executive order from about a little over a week ago, ensuring commercial cost-effective solutions in federal contracts, right? That's essentially directing the agencies to say, go identify anything under contract, anything that is out. You have, an RFP, an RFI, for that is non-commercial, and basically justify back to the head of the agency, why am I buying and procuring non-commercial items and services, right? And obviously there are reasons why a lot of things are non-commercial, but the agencies are essentially having to go back and put together packages to justify everything and to essentially certify that they've performed price analysis. They've looked around. There are no commercially available options, which is why we are buying non-commercial goods and services. So a lot of, I think, 60 days, if you will, from a response time for the agencies, probably about 15-ish into that at the moment, or at least by the time this video goes live. So a lot of work there, and obviously, a lot of opportunity as well. And last but not least, we could talk about a lot of the different agencies, but the Department of Energy is kind of on top of my mind, having met with a number of clients within the last week or so, where they've been essentially told by both their contracting officers and their agreements officers or grants officer, hey, if you all have money to bill, you better bill it, because we're not sure who's going to be here on May 1st. And DOE identified, I believe, 43% of its entire workforce was deemed quote unquote non-essential. Initially, there was a small subset of employees who took kind of the voluntary reduction, get paid through the end of September, keep your benefits through the end of September if you leave. That was in like the 400 or 500 range. They reopened that. Now there's 2,700 people that have voluntarily signed up for that, not to mention additional reductions in force, which is really going to hamstring and tie up the whole contracting process, the funding process, the getting paid process. Also, there are 30 large, we'll call them advanced energy projects that are under review by the current administration. A lot of that comes from the Infrastructure Act for the former administration had put out there. Hydrogen hubs, the clean carbon, things like that. under scrutiny. And there's some big, multi-billion dollar type programs related to that. So we're going to see how that kind of plays out, from the agency's perspective as it relates to the Department of Energy and how they want to move forward. Also starting to see more terminations kind of pop up over there. Not a huge volume as of yet, but it's really going to be interesting to see what happens, because you got 2,700 more people leaving, and you've got a lot of additional reductions most likely coming. So a lot of uncertainty at the agency, a lot of confusion at the agency. So if you're doing work with DOE, right, make sure we're keeping in touch with them as frequently as possible to kind of keep up to speed on what's going on. And when a customer calls and says, it's time to send me a bill for everything you've done, let's get ready to get those out the door. That's going to wrap us up for this week. I hope everybody has enjoyed. I hope everybody has a wonderful week. And if you have any specific questions, feel free to email at info@capitaledgeconsulting.com. You can direct message me on LinkedIn as well. And everybody take care. Thanks.